All right, welcome back to American History, Chapter 5, The Roaring Life and Politics of the 1920s. Today we're going to talk about Lesson 4, the Red Scare and its effects. Just really important to note before you jump in, understanding that the Red Scare is, in essence, the fear of communism or socialism spreading across the United States, affecting people's ways of life, affecting the economy, affecting the political state, and the fear that this contrary idea to the capitalistic and democratic systems that we had in place were going to fundamentally change the United States. So, starting off in my classroom, I usually have a game to play here, but we've briefly talked about the three economic theories at play in this chapter. The first is capitalism, which is the economic and political system in which countries' trade and industry are controlled by private owners for profit rather than by the state. And so, really, the individual is the centerpiece of this economic theory. Private ownership is huge. The individual owns and operates any means of production. The individual owns property in personal property. The individual owns vehicles and houses and the business, the physical business, and the business on paper with finances. Everybody is starting out at different levels under capitalism. Nobody starts out the same. And so it's really important to understand that this diversity and starting capital is going to cause a lot of people to frown and say it's unfair. But you do have the freedom to compete, the freedom to start up a business, the freedom to make anything that you want to out of your business in terms of progress. The economic system of the United States is capitalistic. While we look at economic system, we would be considered a mixed economy, but we are capitalist in that the federal government largely stays out of the events and what transpires in the economy today. On the opposite side of the spectrum, opposite to capitalism, is socialism. By definition, socialism is a form of government where equality is the primary focus, where workers are paid and can spend money on what they choose, while the governing body owns and operates the means of production for the benefit of the working class. Each worker is provided with the necessities, the needs, so he or she is able to produce without worry for his or her basic needs. Okay, first thing you might notice right now is that the government steps in here and takes away the means of production, so the individual no longer owns it. I cannot own a business under socialism. That would be the government's job. The means of production be overtaken, and the job then would be provided to the individual. You go to work, you get paid, but because you went to work, you also get things like food and shelter. You get a little bit of money, so there is still an economy there, but it is a much more watered down economy. There's not as much competition in the marketplace. There aren't as many goods and a variety of goods. All this comes from the idea of Karl Marx and Frederick Engels, published in 1848, called the Communist Manifesto. Very, very briefly, the Communist Manifesto says that there are the haves and the have-nots, and that the haves, the ones that control the means of production, vastly outnumber or outproduce, in economic terms, money. They have much more money than the have-nots, and that they rely and exploit on the labor force, which would be the have-nots. So socialism, at a critical juncture, now the government has stepped in, the individual is being removed. Usually a socialist government political style falls under a single leader, very dictatorship-like, and makes decisions much like a dictatorship, such as Venezuela, where Maduro took over, Fidel Castro in Cuba, or even if you look over at the People's Republic of China, you have Xi Jinping, who is the head of the party, and they make decisions for everybody under socialism. And then just kind of a split of a hair difference, you have communism, which is a form of government where everybody is equal, and that's the primary focus, where the working class actually owns the means of production. So there really is no government involved in perfect communism. The individuals as a group thinking, literally a group thinking as a group, uh, make the production of the nation, and what they need they take away from the production of the nation. Whatever's left over is left for trade. It's a very utopian idea. It's perfect on paper, but the inherent greed of mankind, where individuals are always going to want more, and the cravings for power, and taking incentive out of the marketplace, are all reasons why communism ultimately always fails. And so it sounds really good that there's no social classes, nobody has any more than anybody else. But at the same token, nobody works as hard. Production is not the primary focus. I don't have to worry about my basic needs. I don't have to worry about where my rent's coming from, my food bill's coming from anymore. And as a result of that, then production falls. And it might be 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line, or like the Soviet Union, it could be 40 years down the line when you actually start to see that decrease and that decline. And threatening people and whipping them doesn't take any effect anymore. That brings us back into the 1920s, where we have the Red Scare, where we're afraid of communism, largely because we like private property here in the United States. A lot of people have worked really hard for the property that they have, and they don't want the federal government taking that away from them or competing in the marketplace and slowly taking them over as the government's owned factories and railroads and businesses would push out the private owner. We also watched the Bolshevik Revolution happen in 1919, which was very bloody. The Tsar and his family were hunted down and killed, some of them publicly, and anybody that operated in the Tsar's government within him, many of them were either chased out of Russia or executed as well. You had Vladimir Lenin, who was the face of the Bolshevik Revolution. Once establishing this communist state, will cry out and say everybody around the world needs to revolt. Everybody needs to overthrow capitalism. We need to abolish capitalism and institute these new communist governments wherever fit. And this is a very scary notion in the fact that he's openly advocating for revolutions. Not just peaceful revolutions, not let's change your ideas, but physical, bloody, war-style revolutions. In the United States, we see a communist party that emerges. 70,000 plus radicals will join in. Now, mainly this communist party is a shell of the socialist party from the previous decade with Eugene Debs, but it will have a lot of radicals that'll join into it. And there are several dozen bombs that'll be sent to business owners, big business owners, big companies, and to some government officials. And when these bombs are detected and they go off, ultimately not killing anybody, but injuring a few, it is reacted that it's the Communist Party that did this. And to some degree, they don't do anything to deny this, really. But the U.S. Attorney General, A. Mitchell Palmer, decides that he's going to use his position to combat the Red Scare. He's going to actively go against this rising threat of communism growing in the United States, and he's going to do something about it. And so here you have A. Mitchell Palmer, who puts together this group of men that will be his right hand, that'll go and seek out members of this Communist Party. And he appoints J. Edgar Hoover as his right-hand man. J. Edgar Hoover, for those that you don't know, will become the first director of the FBI. And so this really is kind of like a trial run for investigation, seizing a lot of the things the FBI does. And so J. Edgar Hoover and the Palmer individuals that'll go raid, take people out of businesses, look for evidence of communist involvement and bomb making, will go out and hunt down anybody that they can catch leads with. Now, this is a very, very frightening moment in American history. Not saying that the bombs were a good thing. I'm not advocating for that at all. However, the Palmer raids are going to break into people's houses and businesses. They're going to detain people without counsel. They're going to deport people that were born in other countries and immigrated here. And really, this is a violation of the 4th, 5th, 6th, 14th Amendments of the United States. So people's civil liberties are being cast asunder. And why? Because the average American is more afraid of communism than they are of losing their civil liberties. And the federal government is offering a quick fix right here, right now. The Palmer raids are going to rid the nation of communism. So don't worry if you have to lose a couple of personal liberties here and there. And that is a very, very terrifying mentality. I mean, Benjamin Franklin, one of our founding fathers, put it very, very well 230 years ago. Those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety, saying that if you're willing to give up some of your liberties because you don't feel safe, then you deserve neither to feel safe or to have liberties. And to twist this a little bit, the federal government has a group of people that they deem as a threat to the state, and they are able to send in their police force to go in, break in, look for evidence of a criminal activity, and or to detain them away from the population. That to me is very near what Adolf Hitler and the SS did to the Jews in the early stages of the Holocaust. Now, I am not saying that what we did was anywhere near what the Holocaust ended up being, but the foundation is there, that the people were afraid to stand up because I was afraid of the communists around. I was always looking, is somebody going to accuse me of being a communist? And if somebody else is being accused of being a communist, then the federal government's coming in and it's really bad, and I'm afraid to stand up. And that can never happen in American history. That can never happen for the personal liberties that we enjoy. And so then the poster children, as we worked our way through this chapter, for being victims of the Red Scare are Sacco and Vanzetti. So here on the left, you have Nicola Sacco, who oddly enough is a cobbler. He makes shoes. Sacco making shoes, sock and shoes. And then Bartholomew Vanzetti, who is a fish peddler. He sometimes goes and fishes, but he usually buys them directly from the fishermen and then brings them into the market and will sell them at market. So two people, both of them are Italian immigrants. Both of them will very adamantly and openly proclaim anarchy. They don't believe that there should be an authoritative figure anywhere, that anybody could tell them what to do. They did not like the idea of an authoritative figure. And so if you knew of these two individuals, you probably thought a little less of them just because they were very openly anarchists and didn't want to respond to any authority, whether that be a policeman, whether that be a state government, municipal government, or federal government. They just did not believe in any form of authority. Secondly, they both openly talked about how they were able to successfully dodge the World War I draft. And World War I is a recent event, and a lot of people were sent away against their will. And these two men somehow were able to dodge the draft. And it just leaves a lot of ill feelings about these two for the average American. So how they tie into this is that there's a factory paymaster in 1920 that's found dead. Him and a security guard are found dead. And an eyewitness claims that there were two Italians who committed this crime that ran out of the factory paymaster's office with all the money. And as they ran away, they looked Italian. Now, not to stereotype or anything, but I'm not sure how you look Italian. The only way that I'm 100% sure that I'd be able to identify somebody that was Italian is if they had a red shirt on and blue overalls. They had a red hat, a huge mustache, and were grabbing gold coins out of the sky. And they were saying, "It's a me, Mario." That's the only way that I would be able to identify anybody as being Italian, but an eyewitness says that they were Italian. And this starts to immediately whip the community into this fervor that there's people out there that would murder, and who could they possibly do it? Who are two Italians that could possibly be capable of such a thing? Well, wait a second. We know two people, two Italians specifically, that are not good people. All right, so both Sacco and Vanzetti were accused of this crime because people knew of them being anarchists and dodging the draft. And in people's minds, they correlate that to bad behavior. So they're both accused. Now, understand this: Sacco and Vanzetti are both brought in, and they have alibis that are corroborated with numerous people. The judge makes numerous racial statements, and the evidence used against them is circumstantial at best. And in today's era, if this was brought before a court today, it would be thrown out before any of this was actually brought in front of a jury. But this is an era where Americans are afraid of outsiders. This is an era where Americans are afraid of anarchists, communists, and the Red Scare. And so the trial continues, and both Sacco and Vanzetti are actually sentenced to death via electric chair. Now, there's numerous protests that erupt across the United States and in other nations. And through these protests, people do some fundraising and will send money to help Sacco and Vanzetti fight this in court. And so both Sacco and Vanzetti will fight the series of appeals for over 7 years. But by the end of 7 years, the money has run dry. Their options for appeals have run out. And in 1927, unfortunately, both Sacco and Vanzetti are electrocuted and executed via electric chair. A very sad moment in American history that we allow the fear of communism to override justice. And even though somebody may believe something that is unpopular, does not necessarily mean that they deserve to die. There's been no action there. And then the last slide for the chapter today is kind of thrown out in left field, but post-World War I, we see the economy slow. And with an economy that is slowing, we see less of a need for certain jobs, like unskilled jobs in coal mining, steel production, textiles, things that you could walk off the street, be picked out of a line, and not have any prerequisite skills. And because there are less of these unskilled jobs, there's people in the United States, especially your nativists and your isolationists, that firmly believe that this should mean less immigrants get let in, because with less immigrants being let in, that means there'd be more jobs for us at home. And if we let in more immigrants with no skills, then that means that there's going to be less jobs available. And they back this up with the thought that these immigrants are the ones that are bringing in anarchy, socialist, and communist ideas, and we should just axe that. They will pass it on up from municipal to state to federal government, and some of these ideas will actually result in legislation being passed. On that same kind of note, there is a group that rises up in the 1920s that is devoted to being 100% American and looking after native-born Americans, especially, called the Ku Klux Klan. They will target anybody that is anti-American in their eyes, which means that America is largely Protestant, so any other religious beliefs will be persecuted, including your Roman Catholics, your Jews, anybody that's foreign-born and immigrates to the United States would be targeted, and African Americans. Now, the major targeting of African Americans doesn't actually start until after World War II, but that is still a small part of the Ku Klux Klan. And with that, we will be ready to talk about Lesson 5, which is the Harding and Coolidge administrations and the political side of what's happening from 1920 until about 1926. And we will come back with that at another time.